Well, folks, we finally have a bracket. It always comes quicker than you feel. I mean, even today, Brad, I looked at the clock and it was 3:30 Central, which meant we were an hour and a half away. And I was like, how the heck did we go from November 6th watching Duke, Kentucky, and every game in between in Siena Providence to here? It's always an unbelievable journey. But we're here. We've got a bracket. We've got a mid-major at-large bid in Belmont, which makes everyone very happy. We've got St. John's on the field and Arizona State. St. John's keeping, Chris Mullen a little bit safer in terms of his job security. And we've got a little bit of everything in between. Because it's been a week since we talked. A lot of conference championships that have occurred. Some bid stealers. UNC Greensboro, the unfortunate unbeneficiary of that, not getting in over Oregon, who seals the bid last night in the Pac-12. But we've got a bracket. I actually have not gone through and done a whole bracket yet. Usually I get it and immediately go into tournament challenge. Today, I really wanted to just kind of sit back, kind of take a couple hours, digest it all in my head, kind of take a break, and then I'm going to go to it right after we finish the pod, fill out a full bracket. But have you completed any brackets yet, Brad?
I have not. I just started schedule, which what first game I remember. There was a really good Dayton-Ohio State game, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, where I think Dayton won on a buzzer beater. And then you had Aaron Kraft laying on his back. I mean, that was a great matchup because of the geography and kind of the rivalry implications. But it's always good. I remember a great Northeastern Notre Dame game, which was the year after. And this year we have, arguably the most compelling first round matchup, because it's Matt Stockman's current team versus Matt Stockman's former team in Minnesota versus Louisville.
I hate you, but no, I think there's always a good 14-3 game that's close in that slot. The Yale LSU game, I think, will be very compelling. I mean, that's a very interesting game.
The whole first window is great.
Oh yeah, it's gonna be a really fun day. Afternoon you get Marquette, Murray. There's gonna be some fun stuff in this early set. I think the schedule, looking just kind of at the schedule of when the games are, there's not one slot that sucks. I always think Thursday afternoon, Thursday night, Friday afternoon, Friday night. I don't think there's one that's terrible. I think Thursday night isn't great, but you still have St. Mary's Villanova, Seton Hall Wofford, Old Dominion Purdue could be interesting. Baylor Cuse doesn't have much juice to me, but Nevada Florida, that's a decent slot. The early Friday, the 13-4 game is kind of ugly. UC Irvine, Kansas State is gonna be ugly, even though I'm picking Irvine. And then the night stuff is good though. You've got Washington, Utah State, which is compelling. 12-5 game. Liberty, Mississippi State, UCF, VCU. There's gonna be a lot. I think it's all pretty balanced, which I think I really like. It's very exciting. But yeah, it's been crazy to get to this point. Obviously, we had the bid stealers. Going back to even Monday, Tuesday night with Gonzaga losing. What's your biggest kind of surprise from Champ Week before we go into selection show stuff?
Well, I think the St. Mary's game was very shocking because they hadn't beaten anyone. They laid an egg against every difficult game that they played. Even some the more talented teams that aren't in the postseason, Western Kentucky, they lost to. Harvard, they lost to. That was Harvard, I think, without Aiken and Towns. Well, obviously without Towns, he didn't play, but without Aiken too.
And Lewis, so for them all three of their best players didn't play in that game.
And so St. Mary's has the win at New Mexico State, which wasn't an at-large caliber team. So their only win against a tournament team was against the number one team in the country, and they had a pretty firm grasp on that game. So that was super surprising. And that one, right, that knocks out TCU, right? Because that was the first bid thief, and TCU was the third team out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I was very surprised by that game. It was one of those things where I saw I was close, and I was like, Gonzaga will make their run. Because the game, obviously, Gonzaga beat them by 50 in Spokane. But then in Moraga, it was a closer game for most of the way, and then Gonzaga just kind of pulled away. I thought that Gonzaga would pull away and win by 10, and I was just kept waiting for their run. And I mean, we talk about St. Mary's offense a lot. That defensive performance was special. Like, they played an outstanding defensive game plan. They controlled Norvell. They didn't let Hachimura go off. Perkins was kind of kept under control. I mean, Jordan Ford hit some shots for you. I mean, Malik Fitz didn't even play well. Malik Fitz, one of their best players, goes for 8 points and 3 rebounds in 12 minutes, and they find a way. I mean, they were playing bigger. They played Tass more minutes because they just needed size. They played some Tass and Hunter lineups together. I mean, Hunter had one of his best games of his career, 12 and 15. I mean, he was huge. So, I mean, it definitely just that one kind of shaped Champ Week in a huge way because it started the Gonzaga, are they a 1 seed discussion? It started kind of a lot of stuff. And then, I mean, just kind of going through, I mean, there was so much between, I mean, Florida State beating Virginia. I picked that. I was still surprised when it happened. All the way through, like, St. John's getting 30-pieced by Marquette. VCU going out first day of the A-10 tournament. I mean, there was a lot of just really interesting, compelling action. Florida made their run. Auburn wins the SEC. Like, it was everything you want in a Champ Week, in my mind, to lead into the selection shot.
Yeah, I mean, yesterday I sat there, watched basketball all day. Friday, once I got home from work, I sat there, and the time was flying. You know, I couldn't believe when it was like 8 o'clock yesterday, but you know, there were so many compelling games between the one bid leagues, even the games that weren't like, you know, one possession games. Like the Montana game was good last night. New Mexico State pulled away. That wasn't a great game. But even like Norfolk State and NC Central in the 1 o'clock slot, that was down to the wire. You know, guys are missing threes, missing layups, offensive goaltendings.
God, the game was terrible.
Game. It was, I mean, the Norfolk State point guard, or I don't know if he was the point guard, but he was the one, you know, grab it and go, and he would just fling it behind his back. I thought he was going to lose it every time he did that. He did like 3 times in a row on the fast break.
The thick lefty?
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
flinging it behind his back.
Indiana, it was the exact same thing. Exact same thing. He would just and he was just faster than everyone else, which he was in the MEAC championship game too. But he would just plow past people and then chuck up a wild layup, and you're like, what are you doing? Like, if you had any shooting ability, you'd be a unbelievable player. But I mean, it was a lot of fun. That game was close. It wasn't good, but it was close. And you know, good for NC Central and Lavelle Moten, who should be in the mix for some jobs this offseason. But then we got a bracket, Brad.
Well, was one thing on Lavelle Moten. He wanted the Charlotte job, which, I mean, they went with Ron Sanchez, which certainly wasn't a bad choice. But it'll be interesting to see what opens up. I saw something. Maybe Elon could open up. I mean, that's in North Carolina.
Yeah, academics might be a challenge there because he recruits JUCO heavily, and Elon's gonna take only high academic kids. Tulane is kind of a similar problem. He could be in a Tulane if you want it potentially, but Tulane's not going to take a ton of JUCOs. So I mean, he's a smart guy. Like, he can really coach. But I mean, it also could be like he gets like one of the like LSU hires a mid-major head coach, like a good mid-major head coach. Like he gets UNC Greensboro because Wes Miller takes LSU or Wake. You know, like that could happen. So yeah, I mean, the coaching wire is another thing in and of itself. We could do another podcast on that. There's plenty to talk about there as well. But
absolutely. And then I just wanted to touch on the Bonnies too, which were very close.
Oh.
You know, St. Bonaventure very close to returning to the NCAA tournament. Their freshman trio of Lofton, Welch, and Oshunihi. Oshunihi. I mean, that's a really good long-term core if they can, because they're losing Stockard and Griffin this year, who are both seniors. If they can add maybe like find their wing or four-man of the future, I mean, the A-10 should be a lot better next year, and I think St. Bonaventure is a piece or two away from, you know, really taking a stranglehold of the top, you know, four or five of that league.
Well, it is like it's pretty crazy how it all came together. Like, they got Lofton in I think February, like towards the end of the prep season from Putnam Science Academy. one of the better prep schools in the country. And then they got Oshuni, who is signed to LaSalle. He flipped after the coaching change, considering Georgetown and Cuse, and he chose Bana because they play him right away. And he had Lofton on his team, who is a prep teammate because he also played at Putnam Science. And then they got Welch in late April. Welch was probably going to go to Siena until Patzos gets fired. He goes to Bana over. He also was considering Temple. So I mean, Welch was out there for the mix. He's like an athletic 6'5" kid who can score. Like he looks like a really good player long term. And they've got another kid in 19 coming from New Jersey who had high major looks. Who's at Putnam Science. So they've got this pipeline going with one of the best prep schools in the country. Welch was at Spire, but the other three now will be Putnam Science kids. They can get like a transfer or two. They'd be like a really good fit for a grad transfer, like combo wing who could do a bunch of stuff off the bench for you. I mean, but they're going to be really good. That core is special. Like Lofton's special. Oshuni, like if he develops a post game at all, I mean, he is so long. Like the game is just so impacted by him. And it's heartbreaking that Caputo didn't make that three at the end. But what a run for the Bonnies, no doubt.
Yeah, he has great touch inside, and he's very active, very long.
But he could start shooting threes. Like his free throw form looked good. Like if he starts shooting threes, he's an NBA guy.
Yeah, because in my late stock risers, I was the point of the exercise was to look at kids who didn't have the high major looks, and I was like, A10, should I include the Bonnies guys on there? Like I could see like if it was a Dayton or a VCU signing, but I was like, I'll keep these Bonnies guys for now because all three of them qualified, and it's I don't know what that says about the late stock riser process, or if that just says something about Mark Schmidt and his ability to find guys. But I mean, to hit with 3 late stock risers when I can take a look at the list. I don't know if there was 3 other ones in general that were even like worthy of being like a starting caliber player or even like a reserve. I mean, you have Agbaji, he certainly turned out. Jamarius Burton for Wichita State, Bishanishvili for Illinois, and then all the Bonnies guys. KJ Buffin, he was a decommit who followed his mid-major coach to Ole Miss. Isaac Likely was a decommit, but and then Myrion Jones too left Memphis for Penn State. I mean, it's very rare to hit on one. Given this list of like 35 guys that I'm looking at right now, that I was able to name like 3 of them who are making an impact at the high major level as freshmen, and then Bonnies has like 3 that are as good or better.
Yeah, no, it's unbelievable. I mean, I watched Lofton in November when they played Siena, and I was like, dude, that guy's a stud. Like Franciscan Cup games for the next 3 years, Kyle Lofton versus Jalen Pickett, must-see television, folks. Tune in, Brad. I mean, we could talk about Bonnies and like Champ Week all day, but we've got a bracket to break down.
Yeah, we probably should talk about the big tournament over there instead of the Bonnies' potential CBI run.
Are you sure this isn't a CBI CIT podcast? We could become the next Happening Hoops.
Well, I saw he tweeted that Wichita State was going to the CIT. I almost fell out of my chair.
I'm surprised.
They ended up going to the NIT. And then Bob Huggins is taking West Virginia to CBI.
That one I understood a little bit.
I mean, it's a young team, but still, to have the confidence and like kind of like the brand equity to not worry about how it looks.
You also better win the thing.
Yeah,
because if West Virginia loses in the CBI to like Seattle,
like Jacksonville State,
it's not going to look good. Yeah. But yeah, let's talk about the big
Jacksonville
one.
State. How about Belmont? People have to rest on the conspiracy theories. UNCG would have gotten in if Washington didn't lay an egg last night against Oregon, and now Belmont, if it weren't for bid thieves, would have avoided the first 4 entirely.
Yeah, I mean that was awesome. I was so glad the committee did that early, so I didn't spend my entire time sweating. Like if they didn't do any mid majors through that first 3 regions, and then that last first 4 was Temple, Belmont, I would have been like ready to go off on someone because like look, I'm not a mid-major apologist. I think some of the stuff that people say at this time of year is frankly like crap. But I also thought that one of those 4 teams you had to value over one of those high majors that were going to get in. I thought at least one of them deserved a shot. I thought Belmont was the best one. I was worried that it wouldn't be Belmont because their resume was so similar to so many mid-majors that hadn't gotten in the past. Like, it was similar to like the Middle Tennessee State resume and the Monmouth resume. Like, I think I was worried that they were going to fall into the same habits of, like they have 2 quadrant 3 losses. Like, we can't put them in. Like, your eyes tell you Belmont is a tournament team. Put them in. That was all we needed to do. It happened. I got my 1. I'm happy. And they'll play Maryland. That's a really fun game. Like, the path to the Sweet 16 for Belmont is like very real.
See, I was disappointed in the first 4 matchups. I've been pushing this mid-major versus high major, and I think that we could have kind of bent it a little bit. And if it was Belmont, Arizona State, St. John's Temple, I thought that could have like a compelling feel. Like we have the AAC, whose fans think that they're better than the Big East, which to me is absolutely absurd. But two middle of the pack teams from those conferences going head to head, and then you have the much maligned Pac-12 and one of the like the big boys, the Power 6 that benefited from a bad power league against a true mid-major power in Belmont. I thought that was going to be really compelling. Not as compelling with how they did these matchups. I'm sure they had some stupid bracketing principle reason, but they bend those all the time. I remember we were talking about on the bracket draft how they don't want to do same matchups in back-to-back years, right? But they did Michigan, Montana. I remember a few years ago, this was going back to, I think, Anthony Bennett's UNLV team. They played Cal in the regular season, I think, and then they played them in the first round, and that's not allowed. But they said like there was no other way, but you could have just like flipped 2 other matchups, and there was. So they have all these weird, stupid principles. They should focus more on entertainment value, like the Matt Stockman Bowl.
I love your passion for the Matt Stockman Bowl. Like, I find it unbelievable how much you care about Matt Stockman.
I mean, what else would there be to care about in that matchup?
All right, let's look in the East. As you mentioned at the top before we actually started recording, Brad, they come on and they say, "Oh, the obvious and overall number 1, the Duke Blue Devils," and I was kind of taken aback, but there was too much going on for me to like care about it. To be like, "Oh yeah, it's just it's so obvious that Duke was the number 1 team in the country." Like, that didn't seem obvious to me.
No, it was obvious in the sense that they would be favored on neutral court against anybody, but and they beat Virginia twice. But I mean, coming in, I mean, given that the games were without Zion, but they had lost to UNC, they lost to Syracuse, they lost to someone else like Virginia Tech, right?
Yes.
So I mean, they had a few losses. Virginia's only lost to Duke, so they were a perfectly reasonable number 1. I try to look at every bracketology that I can because I'm very interested in like the cut line and like where the Big East teams fare. I don't care too much about the order of the number 1 seed, so I didn't really pay attention to that. But I'm guessing that coming into today, most people had Virginia as the number 1 overall seed.
Yeah, I think for me, what it came down to was like if Virginia wins the ACC tournament and beats Duke, then you could put them in. Or even if Florida State wins it, I think you give Virginia the number 1 overall seed because like the overall body of work, other than losing twice to Duke, states that they are the best team in the country. But because Duke was coming off the ACC title, they looked so good with Zion all year. Like the loss to Cuse, they didn't have Trey or Cam. They didn't have Zion for the Virginia Tech loss. To me, it was enough to say, look, our eyes tell us with Zion, this is the best team in the country. Let's give them the number 1 overall seed. And I thought their draw was really good, with the exception of Michigan State getting the 2 seed in that group, which I think is a little unfair because there's no way Michigan State was the last 2 seed. I thought that's a very favorable draw, and we could talk through that a little bit.
Yeah, because back to these bracketing principles, they have like sometimes like use geography, and then you have like a potential second round matchup. I saw people crying about this earlier. of Cincinnati and Tennessee playing in Ohio. Like, just watch Iowa win now, and that's all a moot point. But sometimes they use geography, sometimes they do a seed list. You can't make heads or tails of these, but that is a rough draw for Michigan State, especially without Langford. They've righted the ship. They had that brief rough patch where they lost Indiana a couple times right after Langford went down, but they have seemingly righted the ship, winning the Big Ten, and that's the dream matchup there. In that top left though, that 8-9 game, VCU versus UCF, that just doesn't have a lot of juice for me. It's going to be a defensive slugfest. Just like looking at the 8-9 games in the top half. Why not make it VCU, Oklahoma, and Ole Miss, UCF? We at least get this David Goliath feel. But people say that there is a conspiracy that they don't want to match up mid-major versus high major a lot of times, so that like whenever they can, so the high major is not exposed. Maybe that has some legs, but I would like to see that more than anything.
Yeah, I was a little surprised just kind of generally to see VCU on the 8 line. I didn't think they were going to miss the tournament. I thought they were definitely getting in, but I thought they were like a 9 or a 10. I was leaning towards 10, but I thought they might get sneaked into 9. So for them to be an 8, I was kind of surprised by. I thought they're a very good basketball team. I think they probably devalued the loss to Rhode Island because of Evans not being there. It seemed because if you look at what the committee did, like it seemed like everything that they did was like they very much did take into account injuries to star players, like or suspension with Wesson at Ohio State, them getting the bye. I think I obviously valued that Marcus Evans injury enough to say, okay, we're not going to dig him too much for Rhode Island. But if you look up and down, like the 3 seeds LSU in that region, LSU doesn't have their coach. Coming off a loss to Auburn Florida, in the SEC tournament. You've got your 4 seed is Virginia Tech, who I think Duke is far clearly superior to, and I could have seen Virginia Tech easily come in on the 5 line instead of the 4. Mississippi State, a team that I don't think is like a super scary 5 seed. I don't know what the scariest matchup would be for Duke. I think if you put Villanova as a 6 in your region, that would have scared them. I think if you had, I think like a slugfest type game where like a Kansas State could put them in the half court, could have been challenging. Even like Florida State pushed them twice. Auburn's firepower, Kansas is a 4. Like there's a lot of worse matchups than I think Virginia Tech and Mississippi State could pose in the Sweet 16. I don't think their 8-9s are either giant or either teams that are going to kill Duke. So, from my perspective, I think Duke has a very clear path to the Elite 8 and likely to the Final 4.
Well, in terms of Central Florida, so they run a 2-3 zone with Taco Fall in the middle. Duke had problems with Syracuse with Pascal in the middle. They were missing guys, but a team that doesn't shoot it well in Duke, and you have a team with so much size in Central Florida who can, play a zone, kind of force you outside with a big rim protector.
Yeah,
that's the kind of matchup that you would want if you're Central, like if you were wanting an upset there. I'm not sure that Central Florida is good enough to actually, realize it and actually, make the upset. But I think the style is what you would look for there.
And VCU, if Evans is healthy, I think Santos Silva is a pretty good matchup for Zion in a man-to-man. And they're going to press, which could, cause some problems. They're going to grind it out. I think the one thing that both of those 8-9s does provide is that grinded out style to force Duke to beat them in half-court sets, and that is the weakness of Duke. So, I could see that game being close, but I just don't see either of those 8-9s beating Duke with Zion.
Yeah, I don't either. Duke is the best team. We've seen them at full strength and how good they are. Even though saying that they were the unquestionable number 1 seed was a little questionable, it's hard to get too bent out of shape because they are so good. And in terms of that 6-11 matchup though in that region, the Maryland versus the playing game, I think that's the best chance for to have our annual playing game winner wins the first round game. I know we had Syracuse last year knocked off TCU, but I mean Maryland, they're just kind of uninspiring. I mean, they kind of limped in down the stretch. They were great in the middle of the season, but their roster is very young, and they have two excellent players. But I think a Belmont maybe could out execute them, and a Temple has great guards themselves. So I think either could make it quite an interesting game.
Yeah, I mean Belmont has the size. They're better coached. They've experience. They have a shot maker in Windler. I mean, I think Belmont wins that game. No questions asked if Belmont gets that game. I think the 5-12 upset and the 4-13 I don't love in this region.
No.
I don't think St. Louis is beating Virginia Tech. I just don't see it in any way. They had a pretty clear path to the A-10 title. I don't think that's a team that's going to win a game. Liberty, I don't know if they can. I don't know how Scotty James handles the size of the Mississippi State front court, especially like a Reggie Perry. I mean, the guards are there for Mississippi State to make shots against that defense. Another team that's going to play pack line and like make you hit outside shots to beat you. But I still don't think either of those happens. I think LSU Yale, like if Yale hits some shots the way they did today, that could be fun because Yale's got an NBA guy in Miaoni. They've got a jet of a point guard in Alex Copeland. They've got Biggs and Bruner, who's super athletic. I mean, I think that's going to be a fun basketball game.
Yeah, that's the second game of Thursday, so that's a really really compelling matchup there. Yeah, and I agree on Liberty. They were very unimpressive, I thought, in the win over Lipscomb. I thought both those teams just didn't look on the same tier as even like Montana did or some of these other regular seasons and conference tournament champions. But yeah, I think the most interesting first round matchup in terms of just like basketball perspective, I think would probably be, I guess Belmont, Maryland.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that has the chance to be the most fun. I mean, EL LSU feels like a 4-13 to me. Like that just feels like a giant killer situation. Like I know that 3-14 is becoming more common, but people still don't generally pick it. Like that feels very real. That feels like a LSU should be about a 5.5 point favorite. Like I think that should be a very close basketball game.
And then Louisville, Minnesota would be the most interesting, but I'm not sure how good either of these teams are. I mean, Louisville has really slipped down the stretch, and Minnesota, I mean, they're fine. They did enough in the Big Ten tournament to lock up a bid and toward the end of the regular season. But I'm just not sure. I mean, there's like a typical 10 seed. They have a lot of flaws, and they have a lot of things going for them, like Amir Coffey at the point guard spot. I like their wings. I thought Kalsher was one of the most surprising freshmen in the country, and they have good bigs with Murphy, the senior, a true kind of attacking power forward, and then Daniel Orturu at the center spot has a lot of upside. Yeah,
I mean, I think I would agree. I think it'll be a close game, but I don't think either team is that good, and I don't think either team is beating Michigan State, assuming obviously that Michigan State beats Bradley. I don't think that's a huge assumption. Kind of put that out there. I think Duke gets out of here, just kind of generally. I don't think there's anything that's going to be too surprising in this one. I think Belmont to the Sweet 16 is about the only like hot take I could have out of this. I'm not sure I'll do it, but I think that's a very like real possibility. But I think I would be pretty surprised if Duke and Michigan State don't play for a spot in the Final Four out of this one. Like I think it's going to be pretty chalky.
Yeah, I could see LSU beating Michigan State if they get that far, but that would be the only switcheroo I'd have there. Where are we going now? Are we going to Gonzaga or are we going to Virginia?
Let's go across and go to Virginia in the South. Virginia gets Gardner-Webb, and then the winner of Ole Miss, Oklahoma. I thought this bracket is like the grit bowl, like Virginia is going to defend and like make you fight for everything you have. And like Purdue is going to be like a blue collar team, and Old Dominion even like a 3-14 game, like another blue collar basketball team. Cincinnati, a tough basketball team. Tennessee, big, physical, tough team. Like Kansas State just gonna rock fight you defensively. Wisconsin's not gonna run. Like this entire region is all about like teams that grind, and then there's like Villanova and St. Mary's playing efficient offense and like hitting a lot of threes.
Yeah, I think that this is a really interesting region, especially because Oregon's been playing a lot better of late. I mean, they took it to Washington last night. That wasn't even a contest, which might say more about Washington. We'll find that out real soon. But that was a certainly an impressive performance. And then we talked about a little bit about this K-State Irvine game. It's going to be a huge rock fight. Ole Miss and Oklahoma, two teams I wanted to pick against in the first round, playing each other. This is a annual occurrence. The biggest one that comes to mind for me was Temple and Iowa from a few years ago. I think Iowa won on an Adam Woodbury buzzer beater. But just like coming in two teams I wanted to sell on, and that I think Villanova St. Mary's super interesting matchup. I think I'll call it the most interesting matchup. I mean, Villanova played great in the Big East tournament. Samuels is coming along, Bay's coming along, and that's huge for them. They need consistent contributions for their supporting cast, and then they have two great future NBA players. I think in Booth and Pascal. I think Booth is probably a second round pick. I think Pascal could be a first round pick. So they have that top end talent, and if your third, fourth, fifth best players play like they did over the weekend, Villanova could even threaten Purdue in round two.
Yeah, I mean, the bottom half of the South, I think, is going to be just a complete battle because I mean, you could potentially have for the second round matchups to go to the Sweet 16, Villanova, Purdue, which like two major conference tied champions, right? Purdue tied for the Big Ten. Villanova got the Big East. So you got like two like major conference champions, one with a ton of size in Purdue, one with almost no size in Villanova. And then you have Cincinnati, Tennessee, like two very good basketball teams, two teams that fight like crazy and rebound and play great defense. And then Tennessee's obviously got some shot makers. And then like you're talking like a Sweet 16 game, you got to like a Villanova, Tennessee Sweet 16. You got to have a Purdue, Tennessee. I mean that's a lot of fun potentially.
Yeah, I mean Tennessee is so fun to watch. Even though they got blown out today against Auburn, I didn't watch that. I was watching the A-10.
As was I.
I mean, Grant Williams is awesome. Jordan Bone was one of my most underrated players coming into the year. He's lived up to that. And then Turner, who was playing poorly, coming off injury at the start of the season, he's starting to come along. I mean, they have a really good like top six guys, and then they have some role players that they fill in on the back. So I mean, this is a deep team with high end talent with like Williams and Schofield. So I mean, they're super appealing. In terms of a seeding stripe, I thought Old Dominion at 14 was very surprising because they had wins at Syracuse and then at VCU, I believe. So those are two 8 seeds. I'm not sure how many other 14s had that, and I was surprised to see them on the 14 line. They weren't super impressive against Kentucky yesterday. Great team, expected at least to be on the 13 line.
Yeah, I mean, 26 wins in the Conference USA with 2 at-large wins or 2 wins over at-large teams in Syracuse and VCU. I thought to me that was enough to be a 13, maybe even a 12. So I would agree there. That's a tough matchup, and that's gonna be a grinder. I think this region did a really nice job of like matching up teams in the ways that they play. Like remember when we did the bracket draft, I said, can we just pair UC Irvine and Kansas State so it's the game we don't have to watch because it'll be just so ungodly ugly, like no one's gonna want to see it. Well, we got it, and I think I'm gonna pick UC Irvine, honestly. I mean, because if they can just score, right, like they'll win that game because Kansas State's offense is gonna have a lot of trouble scoring on UC Irvine. A really good defense it's a deep team. They run a lot of bodies at you. They're going to rebound. UC Irvine kills teams on the board. Kansas State is not a good rebounding team. I think that's a very appealing 13-4 upset pick for me. I don't know about you, but I'm planning to pick that as of now.
Well, I mean, if Dean Wade doesn't play, or if he's not 100%, I mean, Kansas State is very small, right? They're going to run out like Stokes and Giara and Brown, all these kind of like 6'2", 6'3" guards, and then Snead at the 4 and Mayween at the 5. It's a real small lineup, and they're a very good defensive team. I know that we mentioned with Irvine's game earlier in the season against Butler, where they had a hard time generating offense. I mean, Butler, they have two excellent defensive guards in Thompson and Baldwin, and they have some length on the front court, but not super like a lockdown, like not like a Xavier Sneed type. But I mean, they have some good size, right? So it's interesting to see how they kind of adjust after losing to Butler. Kansas State similarly has a strong defensive backcourt. Probably has a much better defensive front court as well. We'll see if Irvine can generate some offense there.
Yeah, I mean that's the big question, because if you look at their bad offensive performances this season, it's Butler was their worst of the year. They played terrible offense against Toledo, an NIT team. They played terrible offense against Utah State. They got hammered in that game. So like the best teams they've played, they've had bad offensive outings. They had an okay game against A&M. They won that game. That was when A&M was like really struggling. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'm just falling in love too much with the matchup for them, and just not looking at the team. But I mean, they've been dominant. Like they steamrolled through the Big West tournament. They beat Riverside by 19. They beat Fullerton by 28, and they beat Long Beach by 8 in a game that like they were in control like for most of the way. Like they struggled early and then just put it away in the second half.
I went to bed at halftime last night. I was actually very excited about that because I was dragging for Oregon Washington, and then I was like, that game was out of reach. I was like, all right, like am I gonna stay up for this whole Irvine game? But luckily, they were up like 17 in the first half. And I was like, all right, I'm going to bed.
Yeah.
So that I'm very, very grateful for Irvine's dominance. And a lot of people I noticed, and I mean we talked about this incessantly, but their main desire for an at-large team was a pretty record. I actually have that same desire for the one bid league qualifiers. I like when I see Irvine at 30-5 in there over Fullerton at 16-16, even though Fullerton was probably like a 15 seed or a 16 seed, but even like Yale and Harvard, like Yale was like 23-7, Harvard 18-10. I like the nice gaudy record for my 13 and 14s and 15s. Don't care about it as much for my 10, 11, 12s.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I always like is when someone's like, "Oh, that team's like 28-6. They're obviously going to beat, this 3 seed that's 23-10." I'm like, dude, like, have you watched any games this year? Like, there's a reason why they're seeded this way. Like, it's a good way to filter out some of like the crazy upset picks. But I mean, just kind of overall looking, I think Cincinnati's going to beat Iowa at this rate. Pretty much a home game. Iowa's playing bad. Cincinnati's playing good ball. Cincinnati, Tennessee is going to be a tough game for me to pick. I might pick the upset there, but I think I'm probably going to get Virginia to get out of this one. I really do. I think I'll probably roll with Virginia. Another 1 seed kind of sucks, but is what it is.
I mean, maybe I get kind of risky and go with Villanova, but other than that, I'll go with Virginia. And I know, I mean, people belabor the point. Tony Bennett can't win the big game. Tony Bennett can't do this. Virginia can't make the Final Four. It's their style, etc. And people say the same thing about Mark Few until he did it. People say the same thing about Jay Wright until he did it. It's just these kind of arbitrary beliefs, arbitrary cutoffs, or kind of theories. They're all just pretty stupid. I mean,
yeah, no. I mean, I totally agree.
Like how about in the preseason, people said Duke couldn't be number 1 because Kentucky was never number 1 when they had all their freshmen. It's like, well, someday one of these teams is going to be number one, and then that breaks that kind of principle that you hold teams to.
Yeah, no, it's dumb. It's totally dumb. Let's move to the Midwest. Let's move down on the bracket, the bottom right quadrant. And this one, I think, is the most – there's so many interesting, fun matchups here. I mean, top to bottom. Like, obviously, Iona, North Carolina. North Carolina's going to win that game. But, like, Washington, Utah State, I mean, Pac-12 regular season champion versus Mountain West Conference tournament champion and co-champion in the regular season. Utah State, like, has their size, first-year head coach. I mean, that's a mid-major, high-major juice right there. You've got, Auburn, New Mexico State team that's very good. That's your, like, kind of prototypical 5-12 game. You have two teams that are just playing good basketball right now. You've got your Kansas Northeastern, like, giant killer versus giant. I mean, that game's fun. Ohio State, Iowa State is kind of a contrasting style of Big 12 versus Big 10. Gunning it with Iowa State versus throwing it inside with Wesson. Houston versus Georgia State, I think, has legit upset potential. Even though I'm a huge Houston fan, I think Georgia State's got an NBA guard in DeMarcus Simons and can make that game interesting. Then you got Wofford, Seton Hall. Wofford, an excellent basketball team. Seton Hall had a good run in the Big East tournament, looks better. And then Kentucky down there at the bottom against Abilene Christian. Like, this one is going to be an absolute mammoth to take in. I'm super excited.
Yeah, I'm super excited for Wofford, Seton Hall. Because, I mean, Wofford's whole thing, they had the 4 good losses early. They dominated the SoCon. Let's see how they fare against a middle pack Power 6 team that people don't want in the field, or at least say that they don't want to. I was surprised Seton Hall was a 10. I thought that they were destined for the 8-9 game. But I think this is a pretty good matchup. They have a huge size advantage. And, I mean, Wofford has shooters everywhere. But Hall can play big, play small now that they've gotten great minutes out of Jared Roden, who can play that small ball 4 spot. So they can go big with Enzi and Mamakilishvili and Gill, like using 2 of those guys together, or they can use a smaller look. And then Miles Powell's just so good. I mean, I think when I ranked the Big East players this morning, I put him at number 2 behind Marcus Howard, but I think he could be the best. I mean, he hits big shots. He's an amazing long-range shooter, puts it on the floor. Great finisher around the rim. He's just super impressive. And if Seton Hall can bring it all back for next season, which they should, except for Enzi, I mean, they could be much higher than a 10 seed.
Yeah, no.
Sorry, I can't not bring it next year. I'm just addicted to it.
I'm a huge Miles Powell.
I'm looking ahead.
Huge Miles Powell guy. I mean, I think obviously Seton Hall has the size, but they don't have post-up guys. You know what I mean? Like they get rebounds, and I think that's a concern for Wofford. Although Wofford does play – like Wofford will play Cam Jackson as much as they can, who I think can handle, without a doubt, anyone who they're going to send inside. Like if Mamu's going to go down there and bang on the post, like they can handle that. And then they'll play like Chavez Goodwin kid, who's just kind of athletic combo, like 4-5, who they can play. They have Keve Aluma, who plays a fair amount at the 4. Doesn't get a lot of offensive usage, but can play like the 4 next to Jackson or come in for Jackson, because Jackson only plays like 60% of their minutes. I mean, like, my question is, like, how similar is this a matchup to like a Marquette? Like, Seton Hall didn't have too much trouble this year with Marquette. They beat them twice in the last in the last 2 weeks, basically. They played the close game out in Milwaukee in January. I think there's somewhat of a parallel there between them and Marquette. That said, I think Wofford is just a really good team that runs really good offense, and they've been dominant for weeks against good competition. Top 75 Ken Palm teams, blow out UNC Greensboro, handle ETSU, no issue with Furman. Like, they're a very good basketball team. It's gonna be a fun game, because I guess my question is, how do they guard on the perimeter? They've been a lot better defensively this year than they were last year. How does like who takes Miles Powell, and how do they handle him? Because he's like a bigger physical guard than anyone Wofford has.
Yeah, I mean, Wofford's really small around the front line. And then Seton Hall's gotten great minutes out of Romero Gill, 7'2" shot blocker. I mean, he could really impact the paint there. I wonder though if Wofford's going to play like a smaller style, if Seton Hall has to kind of counter and not use Gill as much. I know he's not much of a perimeter defender. He's 7'2", right? So maybe all the screening action stuff for Wofford's 3-pointers, maybe that'll render him a little obsolete. But I'm very excited for this matchup, and I think Seton Hall will come away with it, and then we could have a Seton Hall Kentucky rematch, which was one of the best non-conference games this year, where Keldon Johnson sent overtime at half court, and then Miles Powell ended in overtime.
Yeah, I mean, if Seton Hall does go to that bigger lineup, I think the natural thing will be bring Cam Jackson away from the basket, pull Gill out, and let either Cam Jackson just isolate with the ball. He has pretty good ball skills. I think he could do that on a play or two, or just leave him away from the rim so that they open up the driving lanes one-on-one. I think just overall, like, a potential UNC Utah State game would be a lot of fun on Sunday night. The 5-12, 4-13 games both have a lot of juice in my mind. I have no lean right now on either of those games. Are you thinking anything with Auburn, New Mexico State, or Kansas Northeastern?
I want to pick against Kansas. I'm just not sure Northeastern is the right matchup to pick against them. And then in terms of Auburn, New Mexico State, I have no feel for that. It wasn't much use watching New Mexico State yesterday. They were blowing Grand Canyon out of the water. And then Auburn has looked great of late, but they are very reliant on the 3-point jumper, and they'll take some questionable shots, some quick shots at times. So they're never out of games, but they're also can shoot themselves out as well. So not much of a feel on that. Leaning toward going Auburn and Kansas, I think, and then Auburn to the Sweet 16. But that could be a spot to really go out on the limb and pick like Northeastern over Kansas.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really torn with that Northeastern game, because Northeastern isn't a team that has the size to like beat up on a Kansas team playing small, if that's what Kansas elects to do. And they don't have like overwhelming guards where I'm like, their guards are going to dominate Kansas's guards. But I think they can play with Kansas in both aspects. Like, I think Roland and Pushitsa is enough in the backcourt to hang around, and they've got Gresham who defends and makes plays, like to like hang around with Kansas's guards. And then I think up front they've got the Green kid who fights down there. You got Bolden Brace, who's like a stretch 4 who could shoot it and play make a little bit. I think I just really don't know. I mean, they looked good against Hofstra, but Hofstra's been trending down. They beat Charleston basically on the road. They only lost one game, though, in the last, since February 1st. They've lost one time. That was an overtime game at Charleston. So they're playing good ball. They really played really good ball all the year. I mean, if you look at it, they lost by 5 at Vermont. They lost at Syracuse without Pushitsa. They lost 3 in a row to Virginia Tech and then Davidson twice. Otherwise, their only loss this year that's not good. They lost randomly to Towson on January 24th. And they lost to BU to open the year by 3 in a game that, if I recall correctly, they were missing somebody. Looking at them, I'm not seeing anyone who was missing. But for the most part, they just played a really tough schedule, so they're not like a gaudy win-loss team. But I think it's gonna be that game's gonna be a lot of fun. I don't know who I'm picking yet. I have to think on that one a little more. Auburn is playing so well; it's tough to pick against them for me, at least. But New Mexico State just look on a whole nother level in Grand Canyon. And I was watching the WAC game.
And then in terms of the 3 seed Houston, I mean, talk about big collusion. I mean, they breathed life into Memphis on Saturday by taking the air out of the ball with 7 minutes left. And Giroux was just standing there just dribbling for 20 seconds of shot clock over and over. They weren't even crossing the 3-point line until 5 seconds left in the shot clock. And I mean, Giroux is an excellent player, but I mean, he let Memphis right back in the game, and that could have been another bid thief.
Yeah, very close. I watched both of those semifinals very intently. It just, Memphis, I mean, Houston missed free throws. They did everything to lose that game until they didn't. And then Wichita State had the shot for McDuffie to tie down the stretch that just didn't go down. But I mean, that was an interesting little tournament that didn't really turn out to mean a ton. I mean, I keep going back because I really think Houston's a good basketball team. I've watched them a lot. They have guards, they defend, they got size, they're well coached. But then, when I watch them play close games against teams that I don't think are that incredible, I see Georgia State, and I'm like, that's going to be a battle. That's really going to be a close game.
Yeah, because, I mean, they have an explosive offense, and Houston has a couple different creators, a couple different shooters, but they don't really have, a player at the caliber of the other teams that are ranked around them. They don't have a Carson Edwards. They don't have a Tremont Waters. They don't have a Marcus Howard. Corey Davis is very good, but he's not the same level of creator as those guys, or a Jared Culver, or so they're more of a balanced team, and a team that needs their 8 or 9 guys that they play to all play well.
Giroux's almost that guy. When he's on the floor, he only plays half the game. But when he's on the floor, he feels like he's that guy more than anyone else.
Well, they give him so much autonomy. Like I said, he was standing there dribbling, and no one was yelling at him go, go. He's crossing over. He's driving the lane, dribbling off his foot. I mean, he was unbelievable in the first half. In the second half, he gave it all back. I mean, he has great vision in the pick and roll. He found some, I think it was Fabian White or maybe it was Gresham on some great lobs out of the pick and roll. But he's someone who, when it's going well, it's going really well, but it can turn in a hurry. And I wonder if he has a little too much autonomy, a little too much of a leash, or if Kelvin Sampson kind of reins that in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I mean, realistically, I'm trying to think. I don't even know what the matchups are going to look like. I mean, the potential for a Kentucky-Carolina game would be super fun, just because you have Higgins versus Kobe White on the perimeter would be great. You'd have kind of Kentucky's inside game versus Carolina's spacing it. I mean, Cam Johnson, veterans versus underclassmen, other than Kobe, obviously. That game would have a ton of juice, but I don't know if we get there because you talk about Carolina's path to the Final Four is just so much harder than every other 1 seeds. Carolina could potentially have to go Iona, Utah State, either Auburn or Kansas, who is both, I think, pretty dangerous. Kansas, obviously the brand, and then Auburn, the team can just really shoot the ball, won the SEC. And then your final game is Kentucky, Houston, even Iowa State. That is a tough road, but I really like this Carolina team.
Yeah, it's tough because I mean we watch these North Carolinas, your Michigan States, your Michigans, so much during the year, and we know that they're so good that it's tough not to pick them in the Elite Eight, especially this year where the top 8 was its own kind of unit, right? There's a pretty big difference between 8 and 9, from the start of the season to its conclusion, and for the most part, they're all really big brands, and so there's going to be a lot of buzz, a lot of compelling storylines, and just a lot of general casual interest, which is great for the sport. And I always root for things that are great for college basketball. Having said that, do you think Utah State could pose a threat to a UNC?
I do, yeah. I mean, because Utah State's playing just absurdly well right now. They've got shooters. They've got a big who can handle down low and make things hard for Carolina at the rim. I think Cam Johnson poses a really tough mismatch. I think their depth is a concern. If UNC gets them into foul trouble because they just move so quick, and UNC will break off the make and then you'll get a stupid foul, and Utah State doesn't have the depth to handle that. But I think that'll be a game. I don't know if they think it will be a close game if they get there. I mean, Washington's solid by all means, but I think Utah State's better.
Yeah, because when I was watching Utah State when they beat Nevada, the thoughts that were going through my head were they have so many good shooters. I remember checking the percentages and being shocked that they didn't really have that many like knockdown shooters. Like Merrill's more of like a scorer than a shooter. I mean, I haven't seen him a ton, right? I've seen him maybe 4 times this year, but he seems like he's someone who can create more than like your typical like Belmont team that has got or like a Davidson, guys that are scoring off like set plays like Wofford this year. But I mean, Keita is really good inside, and they've gotten some great play from their supporting cast. Abel Porter, is that his name? The point guard.
Yeah,
he had a great game last night. And then I saw a tweet the other day that Justin Bean, who was a former walk-on, he's like their backup center, right? He's been playing really well of late. I don't remember what it was, but it was great numbers for a seventh man. So when they have those guys clicking, veteran team got guys can hit shots, but it's not like a traditional like bunch of shooting around a dominant big man. It's a hard team to categorize.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I think that's a tough team to prepare for on short rest because they just run so much at you. Like they're moving a lot. I mean, it's I think it's a very tough turnaround. Good thing, I mean, Carolina is going to play Iona, so they can come turn the prep early. And Iona, if they hit some threes, could make it somewhat interesting. They just don't have the size. Iona has one big, Tawan Agee, who can bang in the post a little bit, but like, I mean, Carolina could just play Garrison Brooks and take him out of the game real quick. So obviously that's not happening, but like, it'll be. I think that Carolina Utah State game could be really fun. I think it's my favorite potential 1-9 or 1-8.
Yeah, because I mean, Ole Miss, Oklahoma, those are both sitting ducks. I think.
Yeah.
VCU, Central Florida, not a ton of juice. I mean, maybe Syracuse. I love watching Taco Fall. I love watching Pascal Chukwu. Love watching Romero Gill. I just love that archetype.
What, the absurdly tall human who doesn't do much?
I loved Mamadou Ndiaye on that Irvine team that almost knocked off Louisville.
Who doesn't love the Indians?
I love guys that can just change a game just by being enormous humans, especially defensively.
It is a lot of fun. We got one more region. Let's break it down. Then we'll do our Final Four picks and our champion, or at least our first look Final Four and champion. All right, Gonzaga gets the top seed here. They get the winner of North Dakota, or not North Dakota State. They get Fairleigh Dickinson or Prairie View. Then Cuse and Baylor, the 8-9 game. You've got the juiciest matchup of the tournament, Marquette Murray State, Ja versus Marcus Howard. I mean, that game is going to be absurd. Florida State, Vermont. I think Vermont will make that game interesting. You got Buffalo St. John's potentially with the battle, or you could get Buffalo versus Bobby Hurley, or Buffalo versus St. John's. Either way, a ton of juice. Then you get Texas Tech, Northern Kentucky, which is like meh. I think that game will be kind of ugly. Nevada, Florida is interesting, kind of big school versus kind of mid-major power, and then Michigan, Montana. So kind of interested in your thoughts here. I think that Buffalo pod is so interesting, and then I think obviously the Ja game.
Yeah, I could see St. John's just running off. I mean, they were so bad down the stretch, got destroyed by Marquette. Providence had their way with them twice. Xavier had their way with them twice. I can see them now just like taking off, making the Elite Eight. I mean, when I was ranking the Big East players this morning, so in the preseason, I had 4 players in the top 20. The only starter who I wasn't as high on was Figueroa in the preseason. Now I have all 5 of their players in the top 26 in terms of best players in the Big East, with Figueroa being the second best behind Pons. Just shows how much talent this team has, and like the roster is mismatched. Keita was a complete bust at center. That was shocking to me. he was someone who had a lot of hype coming in. He for those who don't know, I mean, he was a former top Providence target, and the kind of whispers around, from the kind of people that he was so good, he was going to start right away. He was their center of the future. They end up missing on him. He gets hurt to start his career at South Carolina. Transfer to St. John's. I thought he was going to come in and really make an impact. He's done nothing, and they haven't had any stability with any of their true big men, and they're just too small. And guys like Clark and Figueroa, who are forced to play these bigger positions, they're racking up fouls. This team doesn't have any depth, and I mean they're just getting killed by any team that has any semblance of a front line. Arizona State has Romello White, but then they have more like perimeter-oriented four men. So that could pose maybe a beneficial matchup for St. John's. I think Buffalo would be a great matchup because Perkins, he can score a little bit inside, but he wants to launch threes. So that's pretty advantageous matchup there. And then if St. John's were to win and Texas Tech were to win, we get the Tariq Owens Bowl.
Great matchups. Brad is only caring about the NCAA tournament from the perspective of former transfers. Brad's out here like, God, can we get like a Nevada? Brad's trying to find like a transfer on Nevada. Brad's hoping for like a Nevada versus Old Dominion championship game for the Trey Porter Bowl.
Trey Porter.
What else we got here? What else can we create?
We could
Michigan Charles
very easily had Syracuse Washington being the Mike Hopkins Bowl.
Yep, there you are. Liberty versus Virginia, the Richie McKay Bowl.
We have Liberty versus Duke, the Seth Curry Bowl.
Hey, that's possible. That's really possible. Liberty just has to beat Mississippi State and Tech. Geez, who else we got that's potentially interesting / stupid all at once? Any other bowls?
Wait a minute. Auburn, New Mexico State is the what's the guy's name? Ross Miller, right? Casey Ross Miller, was that his name?
I think I know. Yeah.
There's one.
How about the potential Quad A Green Bowl, Washington versus Kentucky?
That'd be great.
God, it's so dumb, but it's so fun at the same time.
It's easier with like former recruits, which is like super cheating. But I know at one point in terms of like crystal ball, they had Lewis King going to Seton Hall, and then they had Lewis King going to Kentucky, like ish.
Former teams that battled for Lewis King,
and then didn't get him.
God, yeah, I mean that. We can make some bowls all day. Tweet at Brad if you want to create a bowl, if you have an idea. Because, I mean, I think Buffalo's just toughness would be a tough challenge for St. John's. Just kind of going back to that matchup. Like, they just play so physical and tough and rebound. Like, I really think that Buffalo is not a good matchup for St. John's because they're also going to space, but Perkins can beat you down low. They've got shooters. They're going to be tougher than St. John's. I think they've got the perimeter point of attack defenders in Carruthers and Jordan to really bother Shamori Pons. I think Buffalo can handle St. John's, but it's a good game.
Yeah, I would be very excited to see Jeremy Harris versus Figueroa.
Yes, it could be Harris versus Heron actually.
Yeah, that's true, and then Figueroa. Well, Justin Simon is definitely going to guard Massenburg.
Right.
So then that means Graves versus Figueroa if Heron guards Harris.
Yeah, that could work. It's either way. It's 50-50.
Clark Perkins, battle of 5 men that are just going to fire threes.
Yeah, the Clark versus Perkins would be fun. I can get down with that. But I think this is a fun regional. I mean, you've got the point guards, you've got the teams at space, you've got the defensive stalwarts like Texas Tech and Michigan. And then you've got Gonzaga, who's just like right there and really good. I don't think I'm picking Gonzaga to get out of this one. Although, actually, I might, because like I don't love Texas Tech or Michigan right now. Like I really don't trust Michigan right now. Even though I love the tournament coach. Ooh.
They were so hot. I mean, in the first 3 quarters of the season, maybe two-thirds of the season, between Brazdeikis, John Teskey, Xavier Simpson. I mean, they were, and that doesn't even include Poole and Matthews. I mean, they just had like 5 or 6 guys. They were only playing like 7, and they were just firing up on all cylinders. And then, you know, when you do that, and then guys start to slump, you're kind of with like St. John's. I remember a lot of St. John's fans were very concerned in their week non-conference when guys like Roberts, Arlington, Greg Williams weren't getting any playing time, even in blowouts. And then when things start to go bad and like guys are tired and we're in the middle of Big East play, now Mullen's trying to see if those guys can play and like trying to work those guys in. And I think Michigan kind of did a similar thing where, you know, they only played 7 and then injury here, injury there, and now you have to try to work in like Colin Castleton, David DeJulius when they haven't played all season.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't really have
That's the reason why they're struggling, but
right, they didn't have a horrible run. Like they lost to Wisconsin on the road. That was their first loss of the year. Then they lose at Iowa. That was kind of puzzling, but Iowa's like peaking at that point. They lose at Penn State. That was weird, but Penn State was a top 10 team in the country in February per T rank. Maryland, like, and then they beat Maryland. They beat Minnesota on the road. Then they lose at home to Michigan State, and they lose on the road at Michigan State, and then they lose to Michigan State again. Like they basically like they're still like a very good basketball team, and they'll be fine. I'm interested in like that Texas Tech matchup potentially. I think they just have more shot makers than Tech, so I think they win that game. That game is such a fun game if it happened because of how well coached both teams are. No, I mean, sometimes see how Nevada, Michigan winds up.
Yeah, the thing about the Nevada part of this is, I mean, like no one's going to deny their talent. It's just they've undeniably disappointed. Florida's a team that's also disappointed, but I think so many people are going to pick Nevada over Florida. I mean, if Nevada gets picked off here, you know, what's the reaction from their fans, do you think, around the season? Is it just like total dejection? Are they going to want to fire Musselman? Like what's the doomsday scenario here?
I think if they lose to Florida, it's the season was a failure, even though they won 29 games. Because their thing is like most Nevada fans, like even though they're like kind of frustrated, it seems like, oh, we still won 29 games, like we're still good, like we'll be fine, like we can beat anyone. Like our schedule wasn't that tough, but like we tried to play people. And, like, we can beat anyone in March. I think as long as they go to the Sweet 16 again, people won't be, like, that destroyed. But if they lost to Florida, it'd be a tough look.
So that Nevada-Michigan game is probably the most compelling second-round matchup. I mean,
Villanova-Purdue or them, yeah, I would say.
Yep. Trying to think of other ones. Because, I mean, that's just, you know, a super talented matchup there.
I mean, you get the potential giant killer like Duke VCU, Kentucky Wofford.
I think the least appealing one is probably Wisconsin Kansas State.
Oh yeah, that would be horrible. Virginia Ole Miss has no juice.
Iowa State Houston, very very juicy.
I like that a lot. Yeah.
Utah State UNC I think has a lot of juice. I think Syracuse Gonzaga has some juice.
LSU Belmont, LSU Maryland, both would be interesting. Belmont for the trip to the Sweet 16.
Mississippi State, Virginia Tech, I think is a sneaky good one. But if any of those teams are upset, that would be just hard. Like Virginia Tech versus Liberty, like I don't know, no juice.
People in downstate Virginia would care.
Well, I didn't know this, but I guess Liberty is like this very, very controversial school.
Yeah. And
it's going to like ruin people's enjoyment of the NCAA tournament.
Yeah.
It's like BYU, but like super Catholic or whatever, super Christian.
Yeah. My perspective on this has kind of been like, I don't have like I can disagree with like Liberty, like universities, like standing on certain issues and still be like, this is a basketball team recruited by Richie McKay. And like, I don't like really care that much. And like, people are welcome to disagree and like not root for Liberty as a result. But like, in my mind, it's like, this is a basketball team. Like the basketball players aren't like actively voicing these things. Like if they, if the basketball team had done something that was like racist or like sexist or like homophobic, then I would have a lot more problem being like, oh, like let's root for Liberty. But like, I think in an NCAA tournament game, like this is the basketball team. Like this isn't the school.
Yeah, I mean, like school. I mean, things happen at colleges all the time that are like sexual assault. I mean, like every college has those issues. Like you can't just like if you're gonna cancel a college every time something happens. I mean, there's gonna be nothing left.
Yeah, no, I think a lot of it has to do with like their leadership. Like their president is very like controversial, and like their AD is the Baylor AD who was in charge of them when their sexual assault scandal happened. So like there's some stuff there that's not great, and they just like hired Hugh Freeze in football. But it's like, in my mind, like it's a basketball team. Like
yeah,
just
chill out, watch the game.
Right, I don't have the time
to lose by 20 in Mississippi State. Just chill out.
Right. I don't have the time to like play moral police on every single school.
No,
quite frankly. But yeah, they're not going to beat Mississippi State. I don't see that happening. But if they do, Twitter will go interesting amongst the mid-major madness folk.
And I'm happy for the mid-major folk that they got Belmont in. I started to see some people saying that like UNCG was one of the most snubbed teams of all time. Like, all right, you got one of your teams in, and St. Mary's now. They're rated on the seed list ahead of St. John's and Arizona State. So they had some sort of a at-large case. Now they would never have gotten it without beating Gonzaga. But I mean, how much could that Gonzaga win have boosted them? More than like 8 spots? Because if not, they would be like a next 4 out.
I mean, I feel like it would have to boost them at least 8 spots, right? Like a team that has no great wins beating the best team in the country, in my mind, would have to value at least at 8 spots.
Okay, yeah. It was just interesting because their whole profile was their strong net, and like NC State's whole profile strong net case was thrown out the window. So I was interested that they were treated differently. It was almost like for the automatic qualifiers they used net, and for the at-large, they did their normal process.
Yeah, no, I would agree. It didn't. It does. Like, I would just love to be in that room. Like, I think it would solve a lot of my questions about this whole process.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that I noticed, I don't remember if I said this already in the podcast, but the Stanford AD being the chair. Once I heard that, I was like, all right, Arizona State's in. Like the Stanford AD is not going to knock Arizona State out. And then in terms of just general takeaways, I think we saw that it was okay if you had a difficult schedule but didn't win those games. Based on like VCU had a super difficult schedule, not a lot came out of it. Washington too, which I actually like because we need these difficult non-conference games. So it's like saying, all right, you went out there and gave us some compelling games. Teams like NC State did not. They directly disobeyed what we told them to do in scheduling tough. So we're going to reward you and not them. I think that's perfectly fine. And then it does seem like overall record that there is a breaking point. I know a lot of people with Indiana's wins, with Texas's wins, they thought that they were going to get in, but there is indeed a overall record breaking point, and it looks to be the 4 games over 500. And if you have 15 losses, you need something spectacular on your resume.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I mean, I thought the big thing that was interesting is like we didn't see this like statement about the net. Was the thing I was kind of looking for was, oh, like it's the first year of this system. Are we going to use it as the be all end all, or is it just going to be our sorting tool in terms of how we value wins. And for the most part, that's what they did, which means the net worked the way it was supposed to. The net didn't put in teams who didn't do what they're supposed to do in order to get in the first place. Like, they didn't put in NC State who didn't earn it by beating anyone. They didn't, and playing a terrible schedule. They didn't put in Texas for losing 16 times but still being highly regarded. It put in the teams that had beaten good teams by having a good net, by beating teams that had good nets, using it as a sorting tool, which in my mind is what it should be. It shouldn't be, oh, well, the Nets is the best team in the country. This is who's getting the 1 seed. And this is the 36th best team, so they're getting the 36th, at large. It should be, this is how we evaluate the level of wins you have. Now let's look at the resumes and see how good you are. And let's use the metrics to weigh into that. Like, sure, like it should matter that NC State is top 35 in net and Ken Pom and KPI, I think, maybe not. Sagarin, like, let's look at those numbers, sure. But, like, it shouldn't be, oh, well, NC State is top 35 in net, so they're in. Furman is top 45 in net, so they're in. St. John's is top 75 in net, so they're out.
No, I completely agree. And I mean, they said the whole time that it was a sorting tool. And then people are like, well, I don't understand why, this team's on the bubble with this net and this team's not in my favorite team's not in with this net. Well, it's a sorting tool. How many times can they say sorting tool? And I think it was interesting that I don't remember who pointed this out, but it was like the closest metric to the net in terms of comparison was Ken Pom. So they basically just made their own Ken Pom and paid a lot of money for it.
Right, I don't understand it. They could have just used Ken Pom. Ken Pom is good. Everyone accepts that Ken Pom is like a solid. It does the job, like no one looks at Ken Pom like Ken Pom sucks. Like, it has holes. Just like Kerry Milner from Bleacher Report did a lot of like tweeting about how the net is like flawed because like look how much it's valuing NC State and look how much it's valuing like other St. Mary's for having efficient performances and no wins. As long as it's the sorting tool, that's fine. It's dumb that you would use the RPI, like a resume like metric basically. But it is like a resume metric to be like, oh, well, this is how good a team this team is. Because beating NC State should not be the 95th or whatever their RPI is. NC State's a good basketball team. No one turns on NC State and is like, oh yeah, that's about the same as beating like Jacksonville State or like Ryder last year with 75 in RPI. Do you mean to tell me that you should value a win over Ryder if you're using a quadrant-based ranking system more than you valued a win over NC State? I think that's absurd.
And then people with the whole, this drives me crazy. I see it every day. Like, the quadrant system is stupid because a neutral win over Penn State is the same as a home win versus Virginia. Like, what are you talking about? No, it's not. Like, people with blind resumes, it's so stupid because it's deliberately favors teams with a lot of okay wins, right? Like a team like Florida had a win at LSU. Like, that's incredibly valuable. That's worth more than comparable bubble teams, wins over Lipscomb. Like, on the CBS podcast, they're doing and I'm doing air quotes right now for a deep breakdown of Florida versus Belmont. They did not mention once that Florida had a win at LSU. Now you're trying to directly compare Belmont and Florida without mentioning the best part of Florida's resume. How does that make any sense? It's almost like they had an agenda, like they wanted to push these mid-major teams for deliberately leaving out a extremely crucial piece of information. It was insanity, and people with this idea that all the selection committee doesn't know who teams have beaten. They just see, is it quadrant 1, quadrant 2, quadrant 3? It's insane.
I do think we do have to do a better job. I think it was Norlander who got a thread today where it was like, understand what a win means in like its location and like they were using the Sagarin tool, where they were like basically Belmont beating Murray State at Murray State is the equivalent of beating Kansas if Kansas is on the road. Because of like, this is how much you weight Kansas's home court versus road. This is how you weight Murray State's. And it basically creates this like, the approximate value of that win is the same. But like, undoubtedly, if Belmont had Kansas come to Belmont and win, people would be like, Belmont's a lock. But Belmont beats Murray State on the road, and it's like, oh, you know, like they beat a good mid-major, like plucky old Murray, you know? Like, we need to do that more often. We need to understand what resumes mean.
Yeah, I agree. And I know a lot of people, push like wins above bubble, or I saw them on Parcells. I have no idea what either of those is. I'm sure they're mathematically sounding great, but you really just all I need from you as a fan, as a media member, as a anyone with a remote amount of interest, is just understand that wins on the road are harder than wins at neutral, which are harder than wins at home, and that it's a quadrant one, but that doesn't mean they're all worth the same. And I mean, people would make fun of Jay Billis last year, where he said the whole thing like, "Oh, winning at Duke is the same as winning at Rider." Like it's just not true. And people use it to prove a point on the selection system, usually to kind of say that the mid majors are being discriminated against, but it's just not true. It's a complete fabrication. It's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, everyone has an agenda at this time of year. I think that's the frustrating thing. Is like you just don't know like who like to trust in terms of what they're saying, because I'm not a bracketologist, so I can't sit down and be like, this is how the bubble looks. Like I can like generally understand a little bit of the background on. I can understand a little bit of background of like what a bubble team looks like, and I can like build resumes, but like I don't have like the same depth of understanding as these bracketologists. But it feels like a lot of bracketologists have like their opinion built in. They cook in like their mid-major bias.
I would rather have a bracketologist, and because everyone's like we're in mid-December and their bracketology is this is what it would be right now. Like I want these guys to try to predict how it's going to look at the end. I don't care what it's like right now. I want them to take the next step and like project forward, but they don't, because they don't want to be criticized for their opinion. They just want to say, oh, like it's not me who has your team too low. This is the science of bracketology. This isn't my opinion. They want to kind of hide behind that veil. I think that you should try to predict. Maybe it's not as straightforward, with resumes and stuff, but that's something that I would like to see more bracket people do.
Yeah, no, and I completely agree. And I think we could do this all day, Brad. Like you and I could just sit here and chat and complain about people on Twitter and complain about this process. But I think generally, before we wrap this up, I think the committee did a good job this year. I think we have a field that makes sense. I don't think we have some major snub. I think we have representation for mid-majors. We also have good teams represented. I don't think there's one like region that's so stacked that it's unfair. I think they did a good job.
Yeah, I have no complaints. I don't usually have too many complaints. I'm kind of like, all right, once we know the bracket, let's move on to the games, right? My brain goes completely from, all right, now I have the bracket, now I don't care about the bracket. But I remember last year being very, very surprised that Notre Dame was the first team out. Because I remember last year thinking Oklahoma State was going to get in because they had so many good wins. But just goes to show with the Notre Dame thing last year and the Duke thing and Ohio State thing this year, that they do take into account injuries, some injuries, the injuries that they feel like, which, you know, I'm not sure how I feel about that. More negative toward positive. I think this is opening a huge can of worms, but in general, I have no real complaints.
All right. Well, I think we'll wrap this podcast up because we're pushing an hour and a half here. We probably won't talk until before the next set of games are done. I actually have to touch base with you, Brad. I'm actually going out of the country next weekend, going to be gone, leaving Saturday night for London for a class trip. So I'll be gone for Sunday of the round of 32 through the Saturday of the Elite Eight. I'll be out.
That's a disaster.
It's tough. It's a tough look. The good thing is that I'll just stay up and watch the games like in my hotel, like at night, because like it'll be so late when these games are happening. Because with the exception of Sunday, which I'll lose pretty much, on the next week there'll be night games, which means they'll be like in the middle of the night in London. So I'll just stay up and tweet. But that is a disaster. But we got to figure out how to do this pod if I'm gonna be out of the country. But we will be back soon enough talking college basketball for you, and hopefully your brackets go well. Best of luck to all of you in your brackets. Thanks for listening and have a great night.